Okay, we are here today for episode 3 of Cogdell Law Uncensored. Today we have Tommy. Shujan has blessed us with his presence today, and of course, Dan the man. Dan, how are you doing today?
I'm well. How are you?
Doing well. What about you guys? You guys feeling good today?
Listen, I know who's feeling good, man. I saw Dan pull up in that suit. I think we got to talk about this.
Yeah, the suit is sick, Dan. I mean, we got the inside look, the closer look, but the pinstripes say guilty, not guilty. Is that right?
No, they say not guilty.
Just not guilty.
I mean, technically, they do say guilty and not guilty.
No, you're supposed to start with a not.
True, not guilty. So talk to us about the suit. How did you come up with it? Who made it? All the good stuff.
So, like every other asshole, I thought the Conor McGregor "fuck you" suit was cool, right? That just it appeals to asshole, and I'm a pledge member. And I tried to buy one, but I found out that the company that makes that suit for Conor would not sell it to anybody else. They said that he trademarked it. I don't think you can trademark "fuck you." It was around a lot longer than Conor, but he may think so. But in any event, so I talked to. There's a guy named Rudy Fastari who's a clothier in Houston, and he found an Italian company that would weave whatever you want to in a suit. And so I thought, well, let's go the other way. So it's woven in the suit, not guilty, not guilty, not guilty. And it looks like, a chalk stripe. And until you get really close to it, you don't realize what it says. So it's one of one. Unfortunately,
did you trademark it?
I did not. I don't think you can trademark not guilty either.
Dang.
It's one of one, and it was quite expensive. I hope to be buried in it, just not next week. Yeah. Here it is.
No, that's badass. Trademarking "fuck you" is one thing, but if anyone could trademark not guilty,
yeah, I mean that makes more sense.
It's got to be.
Yeah.
Are you going to get it in any other color?
Well, it depends on how well this podcast goes.
We started this podcast for Dan, 2 weeks ago now. It hasn't been long, and
that's what she said.
And taking a quick look at just the analytics, I want to just rip through. I mean, we could just look at the last 7 days. We got 1.5K comments. Not one comment has said "get a real job" when it comes to Dan. When we start a podcast, that's the number one. That's the number one comment.
I think the top 2 comments for us was "get a real job" and "tariff podcast equipment."
Yeah,
and none of those comments have popped up on your page.
Listen, Dan has haters. He's got lovers, but no one's telling him to get a real job. So shout out to Dan.
We got to get the number of this guy who did this suit, and we'll get the Chinese version of it, the tariffed version. And I think at that point
the Temu version, the Alibaba version.
That's what we got to do, man.
But Dan, we had a lot of fun with the segment last week when we recorded, just reacting to your comment section. We've already posted some of those clips. They're doing well online. It's fun to engage with your comments. So we're going to go ahead and start with that segment this week as well. Again, short period of time since we got together last week, but already, you have another video that's doing some pretty big numbers, over 1,200 likes and over 100 comments on this specific clip, which we posted less than 24 hours ago. So I want to just play it for you really quick and take a look at the comments.
If a president or if a president, I guess that's what we have to call him because we elected him. If a president can control who can have access to a courtroom, my God, I mean, that's the end of a civilized country as we know it. That's the end of the rule of law. If the president says you can't even enter the building, you can't practice law. You can't represent your client. You can't make an argument. You are literally banned if the executive order is upheld from appearing. It's insane.
So that was the clip, and clearly, when you bring Trump up in any way, shape, or form, you're going to get a lot of opinions. So I want to highlight a specific. I mean, there's a lot here that are funny that you can just kind of proofread, but a specific comment here. Help me out, Shujan. Which one?
Just a little bit down. This one. Poo. No, wait. Keep going. Yeah, this one right here. Dynamite right here.
Okay, I see it. Okay, so Dynamite said he's an attorney in Houston who is very wealthy. I've heard he's also supporting the Cheeto.
Dynamite needs to get a new Googler I am not very wealthy. I've been married 4 times. Do the math.
I guess that's evidence. Yeah.
That's the best evidence you could have that you're not wealthy. And I heard also supported the Cheeto. That's legally speaking, that's utter and complete and total fucking bullshit. I have been on shows that are Trump friendly, but I've never advocated supporting President Trump. I've represented people that are close to him and all of that, but I stand by my earlier comments. I think the man is the most dangerous threat to democracy, not in my lifetime, in the history of this country.
Fire. So I probably should have had these. You're right. Probably should have had these comments like pulled up, but I'm gonna find the second one that.
Yeah. While Aaron does this, I think you're getting a lot of supporters as well. Anything you'd like to say to the people that are supporting you?
It's a free country. Support who you want. I appreciate the support, but I'm not here to make friends. I'm not here to make enemies. I appreciate whatever support. But look, as I said before, Sujan, if you become a criminal defense lawyer in an effort to make friends, you chose the wrong gig. I mean, you better have some pretty thick skin if you do what I do. I think, Aaron, you're looking for the one that he banned corrupt lawyers that were paid by our tax dollars to lie for Democrats and go on political witch hunts.
Yes.
Jay Magan.
Okay, which I'm sure is a play on MAGA somewhere in there. He's a maggot, so that's fine too. Again, it's a free country, but I'm sure he believes that January 5th was a good idea. Again, it's a free country.
Yeah, and there's one more that I just want to cover here, which damn, I'm gonna have to find.
Lily, yep. Thanks for speaking up. More lawyers need to be talking.
That's a comment you don't often hear.
So
no, you have a lot of support.
I will say actually, I think this is a very good thing. Predominantly, a lot of the comments you're getting are positive,
right?
And they're either supporting you or they're agreeing with you and your kind of beliefs. So, complete opposite once again than what we're used to seeing on our platform. So it's really good to see.
I really like this lawyer. He's just smart in a state full of dummies.
Way to go, Drake 40. Or Drake? Is it Drake 40 or is it Drake 40? I don't know.
We'll work on the name.
Well, in this segment, where we'll have it lined up and teed up a little bit better next time, but you're gonna have to really have to work with these names because a lot of times like people aren't putting their real names, so it's kind of hard to read. But it's fun for us to kind of take a look at your analytics, break them down, and just see how you make people feel pretty engaged to what you have to say, either good or bad. It's always a good sign in social media to invoke like any kind of emotion, and clearly you're resonating with people here in Texas, so we're excited to keep kind of pushing content and seeing your perspective and opinion on different subjects, right?
Aaron, you've heard it said 100 times, but the older you get, the less you give a shit about what people have to say about you, and that's true. I mean, there was a time when I would probably be more cultivating of positive remarks, but I'm 68. I got about, do the math, 12, 15 years of livable life left, and I don't give a fuck what the vast majority of people think about me. What I care about is doing the best job I can at whatever I'm doing, and if I make friends along the way or gain support along the way, that's great, and if I don't, that's fine too.
Does it not bother you when, like I think with the Epic City case, you were mentioning that, I mean, there were a lot of personal attacks, like even some messages kind of threatening you.
Nah, I'm stockpiling those. I love getting hate mail. I think it's great. It means my message is getting out.
Yeah.
What I didn't like is attacking my wife and posting my home address and stuff like that. I mean, we're raising our 12-year-old grandson, and he doesn't need that. I mean, you can come after me all you want, but don't come after my wife or my grandson or my son or whatever. I mean, that's come on. Get out of your mom's basement and act like a grown up.
Tommy, are there any comments or any comments that you have?
You have one follower who is the first to comment on every post. Okay. And she's a Powerpuff Girl emoji or whatever. And she is just your biggest, I mean, I don't know if it's hater or just your no matter, whenever we post, she's the first one to like and share or comment and share. So it's really funny to see it.
And I don't speak.
Hey, is there a chance this could be one of the ex-wives?
Yeah.
Objection vague. Which one?
One of them. Any of them.
It could be more than one. They could have, you know, maybe I
got a
created a
community
lesbian. Maybe
account.
I created 2 lesbians out of my relationship with them. It could happen. So I don't speak emoji. What is it? What is a Powerpuff? What does that mean?
It's like a cartoon
No, I
character.
get it. But what does that present or represent?
What do you mean by
It's
that?
a very. I think the Powerpuff Girls represent. I mean, I don't think anything in this case, but I think maybe like powerful women. They're
Okay.
like superheroes, basically.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I don't know if in this case it would mean the same thing, but
I'm just glad they're listening or watching or
Yeah.
whatever we're doing.
Yeah, no, I mean, when we're gonna have a lot more to come because there's a lot more spicy takes and perspective from Dan, like you mentioned.
I do, Aaron. I get up every morning, not every morning, but I get up a lot of mornings and just laugh. The idea that I'm on TikTok and doing a podcast that's going to be cut up and sliced up and put on TikTok. If somebody would have told me that I was going to be doing this 2 months ago, I would have just literally would have laughed out loud and say, that's never going to fucking happen. I'm not going to be on TikTok. I'm not dancing. I'm not doing any of that. Oh, wait, I got to show you something. Hold on a second.
to the Cogdell Law fans, if you're surprised about Dan being on a podcast and these clips, just wait till he pulls out those dance moves, those TikTok trends. Those
Set your clock for when hell freezes over, 'cause that's when that shit's going to happen. So look at this asshole. So the guy named Dick. That's his last name, and he started the Dick Law Firm. Okay, that's cute enough. But here's what he put, I guess, on Instagram. So it's got his face, Dick Law Firm. Put my name in their mouth with a little tattooed hottie on it. Dick Law Firm. We give every inch. Houston, Texas.
You're gonna have to send me that.
that's fire, bro.
No,
I thought we were doing
way
something right.
past the speed limit. Come on, dude. It's. I'll send it to you now, Aaron. It's just awful. I mean, it's hard to give lawyers a bad reputation, but shit like that. Come on.
Well, that's interesting. So there is such a thing as bad press or bad marketing for lawyers, right? It's not just like putting your name in their mouths. Like that sways maybe the consumer's belief that this is a serious person, right? Like, why is that bad marketing from a lawyer's
we
perspective?
have fun on this podcast, and I drop the F-bomb every now and then, but I wouldn't say anything on this podcast that I wouldn't say in chambers in a court, right? I wouldn't say it in a courtroom, but as a criminal defense lawyer, I want to say your job is to push the societal envelope, but you're representing unpopular people doing unpopular things or allegedly doing unpopular things. So it's not a buttoned-down community, right? We're not a bunch of silk-stocking lawyers that hang out at the Dallas Country Club or whatever. I don't know anybody that's a criminal defense lawyer that hangs out at River Oaks Country Club in Houston or Highland Park Country Club. Well, that's just not our nature. But you can certainly take it too far with stuff like that. I mean, it degrades the professionalism. It degrades the profession. It degrades all lawyers, stuff like that. Because the jokes write themselves. What's the difference between a dead skunk in the middle of the road and a dead lawyer in the middle of the road? Skid marks in front of the skunk. I mean, why won't a rattlesnake bite a lawyer? Professional courtesy. Yeah. I love.
Well, see, this is what I want to. So this is what I want to bring up. So, on your quick little clip on talking about the lessons you learned from your mentor, which again we posted that a few days ago, and it's just doing great online. Sport NYC over here, or CYC.
Sports Psych.
Sports Psych. There you go. Racehorse Haynes, Houston, Texas. Guy was a literal legend.
Yeah, he's right about everything except the spelling on Haynes' name. It's Haynes. It's close
Damn,
enough.
so close. And then another one here. Racehorse Haynes was the GOAT. Racehorse was the GOAT. So it's cool because we didn't know anything about, Racehorse Haynes before meeting you, but it's clear that he still has an allure and people do know about him. And how does that make you feel knowing that, he's no longer with us, but his legend, through you and just through the people that, he's touched or had any kind of experience with continues to live on?
If I'm tall, it's because I stood on the shoulders of a 5'6" giant. I mean, the man was the greatest lawyer of his generation, one of the greatest lawyers ever. And I was just so fortunate to be able to work for him. I mean, I'll never be able to repay that, even if Haynes was alive. He was just, not only was Haynes a great lawyer, right? He was a wonderful man to work for. And that's an unusual combination. I've known some iconic, great, unbelievably effective lawyers, a lot of which were fucking assholes, right? And I never saw Mr. Haynes be rude or obnoxious or self-absorbed or really doing anything improper in the whatever it was 35 years that I knew him. He was a model in every single way, and they just don't make him like him anymore. They don't. How
important is it for young professionals to have a mentor
in this day and time? In any profession, I think it's more important than ever, whether you're a plumber or a doctor or a lawyer or whatever. It's critically important to have a mentor because we are every minute we move closer and closer and closer to an immediate gratification society. Everybody wants it yesterday. Nobody wants to put in the time. Nobody wants to put in the hours, the weeks, the months, the years. And they do things out of impulse or searching for a reaction or searching for likes or what the hell ever that is. And I think that until you learn to do the only way, in my view, you get good at anything is just to do it over and over and over and over and over and over again. What is it, the 10,000 hour rule? Mm-hmm. I think that's very true. And unless you have somebody that's put in the 10,000 hours before you, you're not going to be, predisposed to do that. I think it's more important now than ever.
I love that. Is there any kind of guide to getting a mentor that you can share, like just in some brief words?
With me, I don't know any lawyer that will turn down a second chair, right? If some kid wants to watch me come try a case, I don't want people to come and watch me try a case. I want somebody to work with me on a case. I may not pay them much. I may not pay them anything, but if they want to learn from me, come to your office, sit your ass down. Let's pick out 2 or 3 cases you're interested in, and let's go try them. You work them up. We work them up together. And then you learn by doing. I think I told you this or may have. So my first case with Mr. Haynes was representing a lawyer in Lubbock, Texas. We had a change of venue from Lubbock to Amarillo, and the lawyer had made some money. He was a personal injury lawyer, and he, like a lot of people, when they make a lot of money in a short period of time, they don't really appreciate it, and they start doing stupid shit. And among the stupid shit this lawyer did was he started hanging out of strip joints, and he defended a fabric-free entertainer, okay? And then the fabric-free brought along a couple of her daughters who weren't quite of consenting age, so he was charged with indecency with a child. Anyway, the point is we're trying this case, and Mr. Haynes takes the first alleged victim on cross-examination and does this brilliant, oh my God, that's the best cross-examination I've ever seen. The heavens parted, the skies open, the sunshine, the unicorns danced in the courtroom. It was amazing. And with no warning whatsoever, he stood up and said, when they called the next one, I was thinking, man, this cross is going to be even better. And when they called the next complainant, Mr. Haynes stood up and said, Your Honor, young Mr. Cogdell is going to take this next witness. And I'm just like, holy shit, with no warning. But that's how you learn. That's how you learn. And shockingly, I didn't get him convicted on my cross-examination. That's the real message.
So the lesson is you were willing to sacrifice what you felt like you were worth monetarily, financially for the experience in this person that you felt like was just an expert's expert?
Look, to put it in economics, when I was a senior at the University of Texas, I sold clothes at a clothing store called Britain's, which was kind of the frat rat hangout of the day, right? That's where you got your starch white shirts and your khakis and your topsiders and all that silly frat rat shit. I made $28,000 selling clothes in 1979. That was a fair amount of money in 1979. Years later, when I went to work for Mr. Haynes, I made $12,000. So after I graduated number one in my class from law school, after I clerked at the Court of Criminal Appeals, which is years away, light years away, literally from my undergraduate days, I was making a third of what I made as an undergraduate working a part-time job. That's the best money I never earned, right? Because I got to work for the master. You could pay me $1 million. You could pay me $10 million, and I'd exchange anything I own from a possessory standpoint, a physical possession standpoint, to be able to work for Mr. Haynes. A car, a house, whatever. You cannot get that sort of experience. You literally can't buy it. So, yeah, was I making less money? Sure. Did it matter? Hell no. I was working for Racehorse Haynes.
Hell yeah.
I think not in today's space, that's also why a lot of the younger folks or younger kids are consuming social media. Everybody at the end of the day is looking for some type of leader, mentor in some capacity, right? And that's where it's created. And social media is also, to your point, providing that like instant gratification. So they're not having to really like work for anything. They feel like, they'll watch. And, that's where I think the rise of, have you heard of Andrew Tate?
Yes.
So that's where his prominent rise came from.
Yeah.
Is, particularly with kind of the younger audience, he was really, his messaging really connected with them, right? Yeah. Which was his lessons of how to be independent, how to be a man, and how to take care of yourself and take care of the people around you, and how to shoulder that responsibility. I think it'll be a great idea for us to do some type of segment on life lessons, right? Sure. Where we can definitely to the people that are watching, to the younger kids that are watching, some stuff that you've spent years learning.
Yeah, but I mean, if you're taking life lessons from me, that's a whole lot like taking skincare advice from a leper. I mean, you got to
we'll skip on the wedding advice, and we'll do like career advice and everything else.
Is there a book that's like a hidden gem to learn legal stuff that you sort of recommend, or maybe Racehorse Haynes recommended you read early on in your career?
No, not a book in terms of learning about the craft, because it's live bullets, right? I don't think you learn how to deal with live bullets until you shoot and get shot at. In terms of great books to read, there's a book called Dirty Dealings, which is a fascinating book about the Chagra brothers. I'm sure it's out of print, but so bear with me on this. It's a long explanation. The Chagra brothers were from El Paso. One was a lawyer, one was a gambler, okay? And they were charged with conspiracy to distribute narcotics, and they were in front of a judge back in those days named John Wood, and he was affectionately known as Maximum John Wood because on narcotics cases, he lit everybody up. He gave a maximum sentence. Well, as it turns out, Judge Wood was killed by a guy named Charles Harrelson. Charles Harrelson was one of the baddest guys, ever to draw breath in Texas. He was a contract killer. The mob used him. I mean, he killed a bunch of people. Fun fact, Charles Harrelson is the dad of, wait for it, Woody Harrelson.
Oh, wow.
And Dirty Dealings is about that trial and the Chagra brothers and Charles Harrelson. Woody, in the film, you may or may not remember the film, Tommy, but Natural Born Killers. Mm-hmm. He was very persuasive in Natural Born Killers because I would argue he was genetically predisposed to have that role, right?
Naturally born.
Naturally born. And he didn't meet, as I understand it, he was a private school kid, I think in the Northeast, and didn't meet his dad until actually his dad had been convicted of the John H. Wood murders. The courthouse, by the time they tried that case, and there was a lawyer, legendary lawyer, probably second, in my view, to Racehorse Haynes, from Midland, Texas, named Warren Burnett. Warren was an iconic, just a brilliant lawyer, but he defended the Chagras. And by the time the case rolled around, they had renamed the courthouse the John H. Wood Memorial Courthouse. So the Chagra brothers stood trial for the murder of the judge, and they had renamed the courthouse. Wasn't a great start. But Dirty Dealings is a great book. Blood Will Tell, about one of Haynes's cases. Blood and Money, another about Haynes's cases. And the laws of evidence were a little looser, and things were a little less buttoned down those days than these days. But if I had a 3-book recommendation to a young lawyer in the criminal space, I'd say Dirty Dealings, Blood Will Tell, and Blood and Money.
Awesome.
Sick.
What about, like, so you graduated top of your class in law school, and I read this statistic online, and you can confirm, where it's almost like 2/3 of people that attend law school like don't graduate, or a third of them don't graduate at all.
I think it's a third, but But let's be clear. I went to South Texas College of Law, which is a good law school, and I'm very proud alumni and all that. But it ain't exactly Harvard, right? So me graduating top of my class, that's, tallest midget in the NBA sort of stuff. It's a little slight to the school, which is not intended, but I believe that I had to graduate at the top of my class because South Texas was not, certainly then, like UT or SMU or, an Ivy League school, for God's sakes. I thought I had to graduate at the very top of my class in order to be able to work for Mr. Haynes. And I've said this on the other show, but I went to law school with one goal and one goal in mind. I wanted to work for Racehorse Haynes. I didn't want to be a lawyer. I didn't want to be a criminal lawyer. I didn't want to be a criminal lawyer in Houston. I wanted to go to work for Racehorse Haynes. So I stopped drinking. I stopped having sex with anyone but myself. I mean, it was a diligent time for sure. And I've always said, again, quoting me again, law school for me was not hard conceptually. Laws generally make sense, right? So if you have enough time, you can do well in law school. If a monkey had 48 hours in a day, a monkey could graduate law school. The practice of law is much harder than learning about the law because, it's certainly trial work, because trial work is never static. It's a different thing every day, which is one of the things that's fascinating to me about it. But yeah, I did well in law school because I had to, not because I'm smart, not because I'm particularly committed or intelligent, for God's sakes. I had to graduate at the top of my class. That was the only way I was going to get that job.
Well, speaking of having sex with yourself, I want to get into the Diddy case. No, I'm just kidding. Which we're going to get to, which there's a lot of that happening. I don't know how much you're keeping up with this Diddy case, but we're going to talk about it here in a bit. But before we do that, I want to have some fun and do a quick segment of does this person have a case? Is there a lawsuit here? I don't know if you know, Dan, but the New York Knicks have made it to the Eastern Conference Finals, and they're playing against the Indiana Pacers. And we have a brave Pacers fan here wearing his jersey outside of MSG after the Knicks defeated the Celtics. So I want to show you here this clip and then ask you the question.
Jesus.
So the fan here, as you can see, is being engulfed by a mob of New York Knicks fans just because he's wearing the jersey. So there are other videos too of him being grabbed, being pulled, being pushed, getting trash thrown at him. Is this grounds for any kind of lawsuit?
Sure. I mean, it's an assault case, a civil assault case, a criminal case. You can't physically assault someone because they're having a jersey you don't like. The odds, sadly for him, of recovering against anybody that's that white trash enough to throw trash at him, literally. I doubt they're really solvent defendants, so I wouldn't be calling Ferrari of New York and ordering a red one before you file the case. But yeah, that's a lawsuit.
You guys have any other clips that you want to talk to?
I support New York. I lived and grew up in New York, and
are they all that bad?
Oh, their fans are the worst, man.
I'd like to, you know,
They cannot. They're not winners. They can't win with class. And as soon as they get a taste of success, they start acting out like
I
just
thought
like that.
the Celtics fans are predominantly known as some of the most toxic fans.
Okay.
like NBA
They're just
fans. And-
racist.
Okay.
well,
Knicks fans are
It's kind of the wrong sport to be racist in.
well, yeah.
totally. That's the
true.
funny. That's the funny
Yeah.
part
I mean,
about it.
if you want to be racist, be a polo fan. You know?
That's funny. I mean, this is normal in New York. I mean, there are a lot of crazy videos of people like just scaling up like the structures, like where they hang like ads and banners up in Times Square, and just sitting there, and just recording videos. I mean, there have been literal like I don't want to say riots, like, but I'm sure it's like pretty close to like a riot.
Wow.
No property damage, but New York fans are really celebrating to the fullest extent.
Okay.
And they did it on the by beating the Celtics. To me, that was like the biggest win. Celtics were defending champions,
sure.
and they're pretty crazy.
So who's going to win the title this year?
Oh, Knicks.
This year, actually, Dan, the field is as open as it's ever been. The Celtics were kind of a dominant team, but they had injuries. They lost to the Knicks. The Oklahoma City Thunder actually have the best record in the NBA. They're probably going to have the MVP. They're going to announce it here soon. I think they're the most dangerous team. The betting odds have them slated to win it. I think they will. God forbid the Knicks win. God forbid the Knicks win.
The Knicks are going to win. But no matter who
It's
wins,
good for TV.
Who's left?
It's New York versus Indiana on the East,
Okay.
and then in the West, it's Minnesota versus Oklahoma City. So
Has Minnesota ever won a title?
Minnesota has never won, Oklahoma City has never won, and Indiana has never won.
wow.
And then the last time the Knicks won, I think, was 1972. So it's going to be a new champion essentially.
So I was in high school the last time any of these teams won.
There you go.
That's a long time ago. Dirt was young then.
And the last time any of these teams made the conference finals, like I don't think in the 2000s.
I had no idea.
Might be like
it'd been that
early
long for the
2000s they made it
Knicks.
to the finals.
Yeah, I mean they've in the 90s they had a stretch where they were with Ewing and John Starks. They had a team that was dangerous, but they didn't win, and that was the Reggie Miller choke series. So there is a rivalry between Indiana and New York, which that makes that series exciting. But it is as open as I've ever seen it. Usually there are these, dynasties that you kind of could predict who's going to win before the playoffs even start. But this year it's as open as it comes, which again is exciting in terms of entertainment and numbers and viewership. If the Knicks make it to the finals, it'll do probably the biggest number. So I'm sure the NBA, is nudging the refs to pull in that direction. But I just cannot stand their fans, man. I just do not want to see them win. It's like there's nothing more obnoxious than a Knicks fan. Cowboys fans are obnoxious, but Knicks fans, like, they take the cake. I mean, they win a series and they start doing shit like this. It's just the most
Cowboys
annoying
fans do
thing.
it after winning one game. Week 1, people win, and all of a sudden this is our year. What are you talking
I'm
about?
rooting for them.
Yeah,
to
but
fail.
look, I'm not from Dallas. I'm from Houston, and Cowboys fans are, in my view, kind of unnecessarily, unreasonably optimistic. But I don't find them obnoxious
No.
in terms of trashing on other people. And
Cowboys
and
fans
that
are
stuff.
annoying, but
Yeah,
they're
that's
not
fine.
obnoxious.
I always
Yeah.
say that the Cowboys fans and golf and Corvette owners are all kind of the same. There's nothing wrong with the product, but the fans are annoying, right?
There you go. That's far. Okay, so as per my other transition and segue of playing with yourself,
Don't say transition and playing with yourself in the same sentence. That's going to get really awkward.
well, I want to talk about the Diddy case. So it's all over the news right now. It's trending big time. Obviously, it's a big case, a lot of implications, a lot of famous people involved. How familiar are you with this Diddy case?
Not. I mean, I've read the headlines and that's about it.
Okay, so I want to go through a quick overview of the charges. So there's 3 charges right now. There's a RICO, a racketeering, sex traffic by force, fraud, and coercion, as well as a transportation to engage in prostitution. The key allegations right now are from the freak-offs. Are you familiar with what a freak-off is?
Look at me. Do I look like I'd be familiar with a freak off?
So these are infamous parties. So Diddy's...
I've never been invited to any freak off.
No-
Not,
no
not, even,
invitation?
not even in Waxahachie have I been invited to a
But
freak
you
off.
have been to the Playboy Mansion, though,
I have
right?
been to the Playboy
Okay,
Mansion.
so that's
debatable.
We're in the gray zone now.
Lured women into relationships under false pretenses. That's a fucking crime. Then I'm going to be on death row,
Well, so Diddy is just infamous for these parties.
right?
So he throws these big parties. Everybody knows about them. I think LeBron has a quote where he says, "Ain't no party like a Diddy party." And for the longest time, athletes.
He regrets that.
Huge. Everybody likes to. That's a popular chant now in stadiums when LeBron's visiting your team, given what's happened in recent news. But I mean, this has been a thing. Everybody knows about the Diddy parties. Again, athletes, artists, actors, everybody. I mean, Donald Trump. Everybody's been at these Diddy parties, has hung out with Diddy parties. But after a certain time at night, the party changes into a freak off. And so a lot of these people said, I was never, I went to the party, I hung out. There were different rooms in the houses. They were doing different things. I was never involved in the freak offs. The freak offs are a big part of the key allegation.
The old I never inhaled defense.
Exactly. There's a lot of that right now. A lot of people are distancing themselves, the Kardashians, the LeBrons of the world, from even Obama involved in a form or fashion.
Wow.
These are central. The freakouts are central to the prosecution's case, described as elaborate drug-fueled sexual performances orchestrated by Combs. Participants were allegedly coerced through drugs, threats, and blackmail. Items like baby oil and lubricants were found during searches of Combs' properties supporting claims of these events. The baby oil thing is very popular online. Everybody's making fun of that because there's just thousands of bottles of baby oil at their house that they found.
They kept used baby oil bottles. It's like a trophy or something.
He said he bought it from Costco, and Costco goes, "We don't sell it in that quantity."
He was buying it in bulk. And a lot of this control and blackmail and coercion, there's a lot of like similarities to the whole Epstein thing and what he was doing. So there's connections there as well. But I think I forget what day we're on of the trial, but one of the key witnesses right now in testimony is from a Cassie Ventura. Cassie is, she's essentially the star witness. She was dating Diddy. She's a famous musician. She was kind of like a one-hit wonder, but very, very pretty woman, kind of key in all of this. She testified for over 20 hours across 4 days, the 13th to the 16th. She detailed an 11-year relationship marked by physical abuse, sexual coercion, and blackmail. She described violent incidents, including the hotel assault. So I want to pull that clip up really quick because I do have access to this. So this is kind of the main footage that has gotten them into as much trouble. Everything else is like they're kind of still investigating and trying to find evidence behind. But let me pull this clip up and we can just do a quick reaction. There's no audio here.
So he's chasing after her.
Good Lord.
It's pretty violent. It's hard to watch.
I'm no expert, but I think the presumption of innocence might have left a room when the jury saw that.
Well, you are an expert, but yeah. So I want to kind of talk about that. So this happened in 2016. The footage is out. Obviously, it's violent. We can watch it through. It just gets worse, but it's a lot of the same. Being a defense attorney, in a position where you have to defend this act. Can you walk us through like how that looks? Like, if this gets presented in court, how do you kind of go about handling something like this?
Any lawyer that tells you that a video like that is not devastating is uninformed. I mean, that's a horrible piece of evidence. I don't know how I would counter it. I can tell you oftentimes, even though this sounds completely counterintuitive, the more a jury sees something like that, the more sensitized they become to it. For example, in the slave ranch trial that we've spoken about sort of topically, our clients had tortured one fella with a cattle prod, and they recorded the torture tapes, right? And they were awful, just terrible. And I turned to Mr. Haynes, again, the GOAT, and I said, Mr. Haynes, what are we going to do with these? And his nickname for me was Skateboard. That's another story. He said, we're going to make them play that tape every single day. By the time that we're done with this trial, they're not going to give a shit about that stuff because we're going to make them play it every single day. And I thought he had lost his mind, but it turns out it wasn't hard to bait the prosecution to do that because we'd say, well, I don't think he said, say blank my mother. I don't, and they put it back on, they'd cue it. And I mean, they would take the bait however we pitched it. And at the end of a 2.5 month trial, that's exactly what happened. They became desensitized to it. Again, that sounds completely counterintuitive, but that is a way to deal with that. It's hard to make a cogent argument that she deserved it or she had it coming. Maybe the position is going to be that she told him she was going to report him to the police for something that he didn't do, or she stole something, or she had blackmailed him, or whatever. But viewing that objectively, fairly, and in the flesh,
him chasing
like that,
after her.
Yeah, that's not good. That's not good. And the problem that you get into, unsurprisingly, is jurors. I think any research will tell you that it's confirmation bias, right? They're looking for things that support their position of what happened or what they want to believe, and so they just search the evidence for things that support either guilty or not guilty, and that's a pretty devastating piece of support for somebody who wants to find your client guilty.
So, so this gives us a quick breakdown, right, of the strategies between prosecution and defense. So the prosecution's claiming, right, there's a pattern. Prosecutors aim to show decades-long pattern of abuse and coercion using witness testimonies, text messages, and physical evidence like that 2016 video. Corroboration, multiple witnesses, including Cassie, are used to corroborate claims of abuse and control, and then the federal jurisdiction evidence of travel of escorts and freak-offs. So highlighted as well is the defense strategy. There are these text messages that are coming out in court right now showing a lot of consent, and that she was, even after the video, asking to hang out with them and spend time with them and do more of these freak-offs. Just be more involved. Can you kind of help us and the viewer understand? There was a 2023 settlement for $20 million paid out to Cassie for this specific thing. Where is it here?
Yeah, it's there.
Right here.
Last
So
line, yeah.
she settled a civil lawsuit against Combs in 2023 for $20 million, but stated she would give it back to avoid the trauma in those events. So if you settle a lawsuit for $20 million, like she did in her case, like how can you repurpose this footage, or how does that work? Like,
well, exactly the way his lawyers are showing. And first off, in a civil settlement, you can have a non-disclosure agreement in there where she can't speak of it to anyone else unless she, and if she does, if there's a disclosure, she'll forfeit the funds. But that doesn't trump testimony under oath in a criminal trial, right? You cannot legally buy silence of a witness by settling a civil lawsuit with him. But in the answer to your question is you would argue the same thing that they're arguing, that they're consensual. They came back. They could have gone at any time, and they came back for more. So, sure, those are arguable, viable, possible positions, but that's a steep hill.
So just because you sign an NDA doesn't mean that in the court you're able to hide.
You
whatever.
cannot.
You cannot.
You absolutely cannot. And ethically, a lawyer can't even try to condition a civil settlement in terms of making the criminal case disappear or not testifying in a criminal case. That's a disciplinary rule violation in Texas, and if you tried it, you could lose your ticket. So legally, you can't, and ethically, you can't.
so the trial is obviously ongoing, but what is your perspective, just based off what we have here, on their strategy in terms of the defense. Combs' legal team, led by Mark Agnifilo, probably said that wrong, argues that the sexual activities were consensual and part of a complex mutual relationship. They portray Cassie as willing participant in the freak-offs, which there are text messages where she does appear to organize and consent to such events. They're challenging her credibility, the domestic violence versus the federal crimes, and then the mutual violence. They suggest that it's a mutually violent relationship attempting to undermine the narrative of one-sided abuse. Like, what is your stance on, based off your limited knowledge on what their strategy looks like?
I mean, when you got nothing, you got nothing to lose. That's a viable, those are viable tenets of defense. The first thing I would do if I were Mark Agnifilo is I'd put an M in front of my name, so it'd be Mark Magnifilo. So that's me, but I'm just that silly. Look, these are tough cases, and I'm sure they are getting handsomely rewarded. But I'm not sure I'd want to be in the defense's position. Those are bad cases. And one thing that's missed on some of the viewers is the difference between, for lack of a better description, the elasticity afforded to really everyone, but specifically criminal defense lawyers in federal court versus state court is significant. You can get away with much more theater, much looser arguments, much more arguable presentations in most state courts than you can in federal courts. Federal judges, federal courtrooms are much more buttoned down. The rules are much leaner, more pro-prosecution. Generally, I'd rather be tried in state court for just about any offense than federal court, because federal court most of the time is pro-prosecution or can be more pro-prosecution. On the other hand, if I were going to trial and being sentenced to confinement, I'd want to go to a federal prison over a state prison any day, because it's much nicer hotels on the federal side of the street than the state side of the street.
So how long we've seen these trials, right? Like a lot of them get televised, and they're
not in federal
weeks.
Court.
Yeah, this one's not televised.
Yeah. The ones that I've seen, I'm assuming those are maybe state courts then.
The federal judges won't even let you take a picture in federal courts. There's never been a federal trial that's televised.
So how long can these trials go, Dan?
That all depends. I've been in trials. I've literally been in trials that lasted longer than at least one of my marriages. I've been in a 6-month trial, and the toll that a 6-month trial takes on a lawyer is titanic. I mean, because you can't tend to your other business. You can't get in new business. I mean, it's a lot, but I would suspect that something as complex as this, Sujan, is going to take, a couple of months? I don't know what their estimates are, but you got those witnesses with this many incidents, so it could easily take 6 weeks, 2 months.
So it looks like this surfaced from a 2016 video. How far back can an incident happen where you get in trouble for? Like
statute of limitations, right?
Yeah, statute of limitations is crime dependent and jurisdiction dependent. On a lot of sexual cases, there are no statute of limitations. Murder, for example, is lifetime statute of limitations. Most offenses, you're generally between a 5-year and a 10-year statute of limitations. Again, it depends on the offense, it depends on the jurisdiction, but on sexual assault cases or sexual cases, oftentimes those don't have a statute of limitations.
So just to wrap up with this, again, active case, there's a lot of news coming out daily. There's a lot of people trying to cover it. It's very, very popular online just because of all of the different implications and people involved, and it's entertainment for people. Combs remains in custody at Brooklyn Federal Detention Facility, having been denied bail due to concerns about witness tampering and obstruction of justice. When you're defending somebody, what is it like when they're in detention during a case like that for the the person who's you're defending? Like what's that experience like?
It's infinitely harder to represent somebody who is detained or in custody than there is in the free world. I mean, to get into any facility, whether it's a state jail or federal jail, it's at least an hour by the time you get there. You sit around, you wait for 30 minutes, you wait for 45 minutes. Your guy has to be strip searched on the way down, strip searched on the way up. It's awful for him. It's awful for you. And this is not intended as a slight at anyone who works within a correctional facility. But I remember in the third grade, our teacher asked us what we wanted to do if we grew up, and there were people that wanted to be doctors or lawyers or firemen or what policemen or whatever. Not one person said, I want to be a prison guard. Not one. And it's a job that very few people aspire to. It's not a fun job for them either, bless their hearts. So you've got angry inmates, you've got people that are not living their best life, professionally speaking, that are shepherding the angry inmates. Even, Aaron, just to get them the discovery, to review documents or witness statements or whatever, your files are gone through, you're worried about whether or not if you give them anything that it's going to go back to back with them to the cell, another inmate could read it and say, "Oh, I want to get out of jail free card. P. Diddy told me X or told me Y, so I want to get all of that. It's terrible. I don't deliberately set a higher fee when I know or believe a client of mine is going to be in custody, but I'd be lying if I didn't say it affects my fee quote, because it's harder, it's more time consuming, it's more draining, it's way harder. I mean, 5-10 times harder than somebody.
And how much access do you have as a lawyer visiting and spending time with the defendant when they're in detention?
You have pretty much business hours. A lot of correctional facilities will shut down at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock. You don't have 24-hour access. But even if you had 24-hour-a-day access, which you don't, just getting out of your office, spending the time away, loading up your files, bringing your assistants with you or your associates with you, it's just a very time-consuming ordeal. So what we could accomplish via Zoom in 30 minutes or in my office in 30 minutes where I don't have to go anywhere is going to take, at least 2 or 3 hours. And that rinse and repeat, that'll go on throughout the entirety of the prep session, not to mention what happens during trial. So at the end of an 8-hour or a 9-hour or 10-hour day and something happens that you're not prepared for, or even if something happens that you are prepared for, your client may not be. So then you get to go back to the jail after an 8 or 10-hour day and spend another hour getting in, an hour getting out. It's a freaking nightmare.
So, and again, just to close this off, I'm curious, do you feel like you can be effective via Zoom, or do you feel like you need to be in front of the person you're defending? How does that look for you now in 2025?
I've never fully prepared a client via Zoom. I guess you could, but I would much rather, if it's just a mundane status check or, hey, here's what I want you to think of, listen to this or read this and give me your talking points in an email or whatever. But in order to really get particularly, Aaron, if your client's going to testify, I can't imagine how you could adequately prepare a client to testify if it wasn't in person, right? There's just too many nuances. Don't look that way. Don't sit up, role play or whatever. It's just hard to do unless they're in the room.
How much of defending somebody is when you're talking to them, how alert are you to detect, are they even giving you all of the information or the information that they're giving you is accurate?
It depends on the client. And equally important, Sujan, is Sujan or Sujan? Sujan.
Yes.
Sujan, I'm sorry. Equally important is, I think you have to be in the same room as a person to be able to predict how a jury's going to react to them, right? The nuance of that is going to be lost over Zoom or what have you. And I believe that juries, in my view, mostly get things right. They certainly don't always get things right. There are innocent people that get convicted. There are guilty people that walk free. All of those things. But on the whole, I trust our jury system better than I trust most judges, for sure. Because I think I think as a criticism, fair or not, towards judges, is they become sort of numb to the process, right? And you see the same thing, you believe the same thing, whatever. Juries go in more wide-eyed and more attentive, and I think their give-a-shit level is sometimes a lot higher than judges. But back to my point, a huge part of whether or not a defendant testifies is whether or not the jury's going to like him. And I think juries, again, mostly get it right. But the one thing they almost always get right is their bullshit detector, right? They have a very good sixth sense as to whether or not somebody's bullshitting them. And that's hard. That nuance is hard to detect unless you're in the room.
You have like sort of full faith in the jury detecting bullshit. Just as a follow-up question to that, how easy is it, or have you ever witnessed sort of a person just totally make up a story and like get away with it, like sort of where he was, or sort of timeline things?
What are you asking? Like what his bullshit detector is?
I mean, just in general, like, either your bullshit detector or just in general going to a court and being able, like, what is the likelihood of just being able to make up a story and getting away with it?
I've never seen it.
Okay.
I've seen clients try to do it, but here's the problem, or here's the reality. Everybody says the presumption of innocence. Everybody says the government's required, the state's required to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt, blah, 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 blah. One of the realities that you deal with, Tommy, if a defendant testifies, is that the whole presumption of innocence or requirement that the government of the state prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt, those ships have just sailed. Because if a jury believes a defendant, not necessarily any witness, but if the jury believes a defendant is lying about one thing, whatever that thing is, they're done. Even if that thing has nothing to do with guilt or innocence, the color of the car that they were driving, what size shoe they wear, what they had for breakfast, or whatever, has nothing to do with the facts. If a jury believes you're lying about a thing, they believe that you're lying about everything. And that's one of the draconian things about a defendant testifying that you just don't appreciate until you've lived it. But the short answer to if your question is, have you ever seen a client get away with murder or whatever because they lied about it and they just made up some bullshit story? No, I never have.
Got it. So when they tell you when they tell you never to lie, it actually, every lie does end up biting you back in the butt, huh? So
well, OJ, in my opinion, he got acquitted because of the venue. They decided to try it in this L.A. Central Division, which was predominantly urban, or whatever the slang we want to put in there is, and they lost that case before it was ever tried.
Yeah.
And then Mark Furman and the whole N-word with F. Lee Bailey, it was over. He was over.
What a crazy case.
I had F. Lee Bailey testify for me as a fact witness once, which was pretty
no way.
Was pretty fascinating. Yeah.
Was that here in Texas?
It was.
What's a fact witness?
He testified as a witness for me. So
okay.
F. Lee, who was a tremendous lawyer, right, iconic lawyer. His most celebrated case was Simpson, but he had a long string of incredibly successful cases long before OJ. But he was also just a bit of a drinker, and he had a client that was charged with narcotics distribution in Florida, and there were two witnesses, one of which was mine, a guy named Bob Nesteroff, and Nesteroff had seen. This is kind of a long and windy story. I'm not sure we'll chop it up very well, but Nesteroff, my client, who was head of DPS Narcotics Enforcement Section for the Texas Department of Public Safety, when F. Lee's client was being surveilled, my client saw him. All right, let me back up. So F. Lee Bailey's client was supposedly at location A, and my client saw him at location B, right? And my client happened to be Bob Nesteroff, who's head of DPS Narcotics Enforcement. And F. Lee presented my client to the grand jury in Florida, and he went in and said, he was at B, he couldn't have been at A. And if he was at A, he was guilty. If it was at B, he wasn't guilty. And the AUSA said to Nesteroff, if you testify to that, I'm going to indict you for perjury and obstruction. And my client, who's a good God-fearing, he's now deceased, good God-fearing DPS trooper or head of the narcotics enforcement section, he was a sergeant, he said, that's bullshit. I'm going to testify to the truth. And he so testified, and they, true to form, the prosecutor indicted him for perjury and obstruction. So when we came time to testify or to be tried in Houston, F. Lee testified for us as a fact witness as to the threats by the prosecutor and the obstruction and all that, or lack of obstruction.
It's crazy. Have you, speaking of just lying and getting away with it in court, have you ever seen, I'm sure, the movie Primal Fear? The Ed Norton movie?
It's been a long time, yeah.
That's one of my favorite of just pretending and lying and getting away with it.
It's not Primal Fear, it's Cape Fear, isn't it?
No, it's Primal Fear. Primal Fear, I'll look it up here, but it's one of those law in the courtroom. Hold on, movies that people love to see, but he just gets away with the. Yeah, this is the one. A legal mystery crime thriller with Ed Norton.
I love Ed Norton. He's a great actor.
Yeah, no, that's one of my favorite movies. The viewers give us a comment if you guys have seen it or any opinions on it. But a famous case that Dan was involved in was the Enron scandal. The Enron scandal, a series of events that resulted in the bankruptcy of the U.S. Energy, Commodities, and Service Company, Enron Corporation, back in 2001. Dan, you were involved in the case. A series of events that resulted in the bankruptcy of essentially Enron happened in the early 2000s. Was a big deal. Collapse of this billion-dollar company. A lot of different players involved, and of course, Dan, you were a part of the case, right? So let's start with the basics. If you can give us a quick rundown of the Enron barge trial, which I believe you were involved with.
Yeah,
what it was about, what stood out, and what's the key part of the broader Enron scandal.
All right, so let's set the table about Enron, generally speaking. So Enron back in the late 90s, it actually fell in 00, I think, or maybe 01. But Enron back in the late 90s was the best and the brightest in Houston. I mean, it was a billion-dollar company. It hired the best and the brightest. If you were the shit, if you were the top of your class, from wherever you wanted to work for Enron, they paid tremendous money. They had all the cachet. They had all the trappings. Brilliant buildings, brilliant people, loads of cash. Their CEOs were making $50, $75 million a year. They were getting, kids were making. It was like working for Goldman Sachs on steroids. I mean, there's Goldman Sachs. There's a lot of hedge funds. There's a lot of financial plays in New York. But in Houston, Enron was it, dude. It was the place to be. You pulled up Ferraris, Lamborghinis, all that. The trappings were unmistakable. So when it fell, it was a big fucking deal. Mm-hmm. Not only was it our local hero company, but a lot of people had their life savings invested in Enron stock. Ken Lay, who was the CEO, later Jeff Skilling, who actually I ride bicycles with these days, fast forward to 2025. But these guys were iconic folks in Houston. George H.W. and W. Bush called Mr. Lay Kenny Boy. He had, could pick up the phone, and either president, 41 or 43, would pick up the phone. He was an icon. He was very respected. The Minute Maid Park, where we play baseball today, it was originally, Enron Field.
Yep.
I mean, it was a big deal. So when that plane crashed, there were bodies all over the tarmac, and I represented a number of individuals that were with Enron, but the very first trial was the Enron barge scandal. and the whole the gravamen or the ground zero of that trial was that they had manipulated their earnings to meet a certain number, right? And my client was a lady by the name of Sheila Kahanik, who was ultimately acquitted. Fun fact, out of all the Enron trials, and there were probably, I don't know, 7, 8 different trials with probably 50 people that were tried. Sheila was the only one. We got the only acquittal in any Enron-related case, right? So it was a big deal. And I believed then, I believe now, that she was wrongfully selected and targeted. I think she was, not only do I think she was not guilty, which means, of course, that a jury found or had a reasonable doubt, I think she was innocent. I don't think she should have ever been charged.
And who was she at Enron? What exactly was she accused of?
She was a mid-level accountant, and she was accused of conspiring with others to doctor the books to meet earnings, right? Enron, and one of the interesting things about Enron, and they had these glorious buildings. I mean, they were badass buildings. They would be badass in the year of our Lord 2025, much less in 2020. But in all the Enron elevators, these days it's common to have little TV screens with advertising this or advertising that. The only thing you saw when you got on an Enron elevator was the stock price, right? So it was a constant reminder of how important the stock price was, and it drove not only the price of the stock, but it drove your bonuses. I mean, everything was earnings related in Enron, and that's where again, I don't think everybody that was charged in the Enron trials were guilty. I do think that there were several individuals that were corrupt as hell that caused Enron to implode. I don't think the corruption was near as broad and as deep as the government did, but there was certainly some horrible things.
Aaron, could you pull up the letter that Charlie Munger wrote to Washington Post about Enron? Are you familiar with this post?
It's been a minute.
I was just wondering if you were sort of familiar with the letter that he wrote regarding Enron.
Vaguely. Right? And look, Enron did some very edgy, off the cuff, out there. So I mean, they were gambling on wind and water and all kinds of stuff, right? So there were a lot of variables that Enron involved itself in that I didn't understand then and I don't understand now. I do remember the Munger letter basically saying it's a house of cards. It's all bullshit. But I don't believe it was as a house of cards to the extent that Munger and others did. But they certainly did some things that were, even in those days, even before we have the confirmation bias and look back on it, that were questionable.
For sure. And was there like legal strategies that you guys implemented on those court cases, especially the girl that got acquitted, that sort of set the precedent to sort of, strategies moving forward in court cases? So
here's sort of my net on the Bard's trial or Sheila Kahanik. In federal cases, almost inevitably, the person that the government thinks is the worst is the first named individual in the indictment, right? And it goes down sort of in the letter, in the level rather of guilty, right? So the first person they think is the most guilty, the last person they have the least evidence is the least guilty, right? And I was familiar with our defense in Sheila's case, but we were working with New York lawyers, which weren't a lot of fun, and these guys came in from New York. Most of them were from New York. And they were sort of holier than thou and smarter than me, and they went to Ivy League schools, and I had, they worked for, big boy law firms, and I worked for Dan's Law Shop and Muffler Repair Center, and they didn't give me, much gravitas at all. But more importantly, I started that trial thinking that, well, this case is going to be about the 5 people above us, right? It ain't going to be about Kahanik because she's just a little bitty Sheila at the bottom of the food chain there, and we don't have much to worry about. Well, little did I know the whole case was about Sheila. The government correctly believed they had the other defendants pretty much in the bag, dead to rights, based upon emails and texts and all that. The evidence against the others was pretty compelling. So they focused 80% of the trial and the witnesses on Sheila. And I was not prepared for that focus. I usually in a multi-defendant case, they go on the first ones first and the second one second and so on. So, but their opening statement was about Sheila. Just about every witness was Sheila, Sheila, Sheila. So I went in there thinking it was kind of a foxhole defense. I'd lay down and not stick my head up every day. No, it was AR-15s every day, all day, every day. She was, I don't want to say one of my best clients because that's like your favorite kid, but she worked as hard on her case as any client I've ever had. I will say this. My fee had at least 10 less than the next fee. I mean, I think my fee with Sheila was less than $100,000. The allegation was that the Enron and Merrill Lynch had conspired together to fake the earnings, and so the Merrill Lynch defendants, they were defended by Merrill Lynch and their insurance. Those guys were making millions. I think I left there being a multi-thousandaire after that trial. These guys were, and it was interesting because very smart lawyers, not taking anything away from them, but they would be, they'd be dropped off by a town car, and they had their little associates and assistants bringing them, coffee from Starbucks, and everybody's wearing, $2,000, $4,000, $6,000 suits, and I'm over there just, parking my Suburban, in the community lot across the street, and it was a different. Well, let me put it this way: so there was a guy named Ike Sworkin, right? Ike was a good lawyer. I don't know if Ike's still with us or not, but back in those days, Houston was much more colloquial than it is today, right? And Ike had the lead defendant, and he said, "Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ike Sworkin from New York City." And there were 14 people or 16 people. We had 12 plus either 2 alternates, probably 4 alternates. And you saw 16 people just step back and go. They did not like the "I'm from New York City" bit, right? So it came around to me, and there's actually a town, which I lived in right outside of Houston called Humble, right? And I said, "Morning. My name is Dan, and I live in Humble," right? And you could just see them. Oh, thank God, right? And one of my favorite little trophies is I got a letter from one of the jurors saying that you left those New York lawyers in your dust. It was one of the most rewarding trials I've ever had, not just because of the attention and the result, but because the right thing happened. I absolutely believe that Sheila was not guilty, and she was found not guilty. The judge in that trial was a guy named Ewing Werlein, and if you call Central Casting and ask them to send you a federal district judge, they send you Ewing Werlein or Ewing Werlein Jr. I mean, he's this patrician, large man, 6'3". He's got the perfect white hair. He's got the voice. I mean, he is just Central Casting federal judge, and one of the things that you're supposed to do is show the other side your exhibits that you're going to use or your PowerPoints or whatever before opening statement, right? So I had one, thing I was going to use. It said power, authority, and control, because my position was Sheila didn't have the power, the authority, or the control to alter the books and do what they said, right? It's 3 words. But I hadn't shown them because everybody else was using these very complex PowerPoint decks or whatever they were in 2000 or 2004, whenever the case was. And I didn't really think I had to show them my 3 words. But it turns out that the other side, the government, was carping about the fact that I hadn't showed them my 3 words. So right before opening statement, when I was going to use my one opening statement exhibit, no, you cannot use that. You did not share it with the government. I'm like, Jesus Christ. So turns out it was the best thing to ever happen to me, because instead of saying power, authority, control, which is kind of a bullshit, contrived, it sounds like you've rehearsed it sort of deal, I just went up to a piece of butcher paper and those white paper that you buy at office supply stores, and had a big smelly black marks a lot, and I just went, wrote a big 0, and I went 0. That's the number of times she met with Jeff Skilling. 0. That's the number of times she met Ken Lay. 0. That's the amount of money she got. 0. That's more. I mean, it was so much more powerful than power, authority, and control. So the judge and the government actually did me a huge favor by taking my shit away from me. It worked out much better.
So
was that the mic drop moment?
I think if there was a seminal moment in that trial for Sheila, probably then. I think that case was won because it was so different. It wasn't contrived. It wasn't tired. It was real. And a jury, they kind of felt it was really rage. I was so pissed that I couldn't say my 3 fucking words.
You had really like put a design on it and everything.
Yeah. But it came across as passion. And it came across sincere. So I think it made a huge difference.
Wow. So if it's, it's pretty clear that storytelling is the superpower of like a strong lawyer, right? You have to take the jury and everybody on this journey with you when you're telling the story and you're trying to defend someone like a Sheila, right? What is that experience like in such a high stress, like circus of an environment that Enron was? Because again, for our viewers, a lot of, the demographic of our older viewers will definitely know, but the younger ones might have been too young in the early 2000s to understand, like, this was the biggest case.
It was the trial of its era for sure. For me, it's like we talked about earlier, Aaron, you got to do it over and over and over again. I've tried 300 plus jury trials, right? I quit counting a long time ago, but probably at least 200 of those are DWI trials, right? Which are little bitty trials, little bitty 2-day, 3-day things. But that's where you learn, right? Yeah, I tried them sitting down. I tried them standing up. I tried them whispering. I tried them yelling. I tried them aggressively. I tried them, empathetically. I tried them every which way, and you learn what works and you learn what doesn't work. So when the judge did that to me, or when the government did it and the judge sustained, I don't want to blame it on Judge Werlein. I have all the respect in the world for him. I have to say that because I may be in front of him, but I really do respect the man. We don't hang out at the same church because he goes to one I don't. But anyway, it was like, okay, what do I do now? Oh, I know. I'll just do 0. Because if I would have been a young lawyer, that my 4th or 5th or 20th trial, I'd been, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit. You would have panicked. But having the seat time of all those little bitty trials, it was like, okay, this is Tuesday. Let's go. And it was just experience, right? And you learn what works and you learn what doesn't. So the answer to your question, Aaron, is you don't get good at telling the story or shooting a basketball or whatever, unless you do it over and over and over again, right?
At the time, that was probably one of the biggest cases ever. Has there been a case recently that reminds you of the Enron case?
Well, in terms of the raw publicity of it, the Branch Davidian case trumps anything, right? There were satellite trucks, from all over the world. It had more day-to-day attention probably than the Enron trial. But then again, the Enron trial was the biggest trial of its day. Both were federal, so you didn't have television in the courtroom sort of stuff. But it was a massive trial.
Like that crypto one with Sam
FTX.
The FTX one. It reminds me of Enron a little bit, but I think remember
very similar. They also kind of fudged their numbers to show
fraudulent.
Would you say that would be a similar case in comparison?
Oh, I think Enron was much bigger than FTX because you had more people that lost their life savings, right? Okay. And in Houston particularly, I mean, you had I think in Jeff Skilling's case, and again, Jeff is a friend of mine these days. I didn't represent him back then, but Jeff was telling me I think that 3 or 4 of his jurors had lost, money in Enron stock while he's being tried for it.
And he was the CFO, right?
He was the CEO. So it was Mr. Lay, Ken Lay, and then Skilling, Lay came back in after Skilling left, and then a guy named Jeff McMahon, who I represented, is a wonderful guy who was never charged with anything, nor should he have been. But Lay and Skilling were both CEOs at different times.
Yeah, the FTX was big, obviously, for us, but I don't think even like Enron was so much bigger, and it felt like the center of the world when it was happening.
One of my favorite, or not tragic, I guess, memories is, and look, Mr. Lay was very respected. Skilling was more of the portrayed as the more iron-fisted, do it my way or the highway sort of personality point. Mr. Lay was softer and more revered in the community than Skilling, because he'd been there longer and he was sort of a grandfather figure. But after they were convicted, I was sitting there. One of my clients, Ken Rice, actually had testified against Jeff. They were friends. And fun fact, about a month ago, as I mentioned, I've become friends with Skilling, and I see him and I like him and I respect him, and I think he got a raw deal. Another topic, but Mr. Skilling did, I think, 12 years inside. Lost a son who committed suicide while he was inside. I mean, it was a horrible experience. Ken testified against him back in whatever it was, 2002, 3, 4, and we all went to breakfast about 2 months ago together. So I arranged that. It was the first time Skilling and Ken had seen each other in 20 years.
Wow.
And it was really sort of otherworldly to see those guys sort of reconnect and patch up, and Skilling got it. I mean, he wasn't raw or bitter about it, and Ken was, had some trepidation about it all, but it was nice to see them reconnect. But my point, long-windedly, is after the one-word verdict, Mr. Lay came out and said, "Well, I'm disappointed in the verdict, but God has other plans for me." About 6 months later, he died of a heart attack.
Wow. Yeah, I remember that. That was
like, yeah, he had other plans. And there's all these conspiracy theories about, he's not really dead and he lives in Aspen or whatever. It's all bullshit. But it was really prophetic to hear Mr. Lay say that. And 6 months later, before he's sentenced, he dies.
So, like you mentioned, Sheila was the only defendant acquitted in the entire Enron-related trial. What was that moment like for you when the acquittal came down?
It was very emotional. I mean, I was definitely had tears in my eyes. It was a little bizarre, Aaron, because she was the only one acquitted. Like, there were 6 on trial, 5 were convicted, and Sheila was acquitted. And they moved right into what's called the forfeiture proceeding, where the jury then determines if there's a guilty verdict, whether or not you have to forfeit property or that's derived from illegal proceeds. And he reads the verdict. Judge Werlein reads the verdict and says, "All right, we're going to move into the forfeiture phase. Call you first for the government." And Judge, Your Honor, can we be excused? I had to kind of interrupt the process to walk out with Sheila. But I was really happy for Sheila. Number one, she's a great lady. We're friends to this day. I have all the respect for her in the world. And number two, it was the right verdict. One thing, Aaron, that a lot of people do not appreciate is the opportunity, the career opportunity that a case like that brings to a prosecutor. I mean, every single one of those prosecutors were tripling or quadrupling their salary within 6 months of that verdict. One of the prosecutors in the Barge trial was a woman named Kathy Rumler, who I like. I have all the respect for her in the world, but she's now the general counsel for Goldman Sachs.
Wow.
That's a pretty good payday increase.
Wow.
Because as a prosecutor, she's probably making, I don't know, $200, $225. She's probably making 15, 20 million as GC for Goldman. And look, not taking anything away from her skill set, but she wouldn't be GC for Goldman Sachs if she hadn't prosecuted one of the Enron cases. That wouldn't be happening.
So she was part of the team prosecuting Sheila?
Yes.
So
Dan
basically what
defended
you're saying is like losing to you made her career.
Well, I don't know that losing to me. I don't think she considered it. And look, there's one. The lead prosecutor in that case was a guy named Andrew Weissman. He was head of the task force. I think very little of Andrew Weissman. I think he is not a. I don't think he was appropriate. Let's just leave it at that. I think he was wildly inappropriate. I think he charged Sheila when he shouldn't have, and I think he knew better. I don't know that, but I don't like the man. He don't like me, but he also, like several others, his career skyrocketed. He was a talking head on, probably is to this day, on MSNBC, and kind of a golden boy of talking heads for a long period of time. Wrote a couple of bestsellers, whatever. I don't like him. I don't think he did the right thing. I don't think he wanted to do the right thing. All that having been said, the message remains the same. Every single one of those prosecutors profited literally from their experience in prosecuting the Enron case. And there's nothing wrong with that. Good for them. But I guess my point is, again, long-windedly, a juror or John Q. Citizen, Joe Plumber, whatever, they don't realize the economic and professional opportunity an extremely high-profile case represents for the prosecution. They instinctively think, oh, the defense lawyer is going to make a whole lot of money on this deal. They're getting paid a whole lot of money, which sometimes is true, sometimes it's not true. But I promise you, there's my main man, Jeff Skilling, right there.
And what was that guy's name, the prosecutor?
Andrew Weissman.
Andrew Weissman. Here's a live look at Andrew Weissman taking it to the hoop. Blocked by Dan. I want to put Dan's face over LeBron and put Weissman's face on Iguodala. Taking it to the hoop, trying to take it home.
Aaron, could you cue up that phone leak?
With the fate of the world.
That phone leak, and have Dan 20 years later react to.
So this is a reaction to the Enron traders phone leak.
Is this Let the Bastard Freeze in the Dark one?
And inspect this switch on the steam turbine. This one switch on this induction steam valve has been failing us, and we need to be down in order to pull the switch and adjust it. Oh shit! Yeah, I like that. And our electrician just happens to be on shift tonight, so that works out kind of good. And who do I call? What do you mean? If I need to come down, I said we need to come down. Just call the data power, tell them we're shutting down. Just call them, hey guys, Mr. Q, I'm coming down for hour ending 1. Down through hour ending 5. We're going to come back up for a QF. Okay. You do your QF 5 through, 10? Yeah, 5 through 10. Then, I don't know, I guess around 11 o'clock for hour ending 11. Right. You got to go back, we need you to go back down. Okay, we'll shut back down for hour ending. Yeah. So we'll do our normal afternoon shutdown tomorrow. Yep. Okay, so. But we're not wanting to have it pre-scheduled. Right. It's supposed to be, kind of one of those things. Okay, so we're just coming down for some maintenance, like a forced outage type thing. Right. And that's cool. Hopefully. That's good.
So what exactly is the context of that?
It was a leaked phone call of Enron traders, and I think they're talking about some sort of
just foul play. Huh?
Yeah.
So is that something that got brought up in the case? Are you familiar with it?
No. I'll tell you one thing that I'm not familiar with that. But so one of the fun facts that I learned during so I represented my two biggest clients were Kahanik and Ken Rice. Ken was head of the Enron broadband division. Ken was probably a top 6-8 guy at Enron. He was a big deal, right? Lovely guy. Friends with him to this day. I love him. Really smart guy. But he was head of the Enron broadband division. And fun fact, the Enron broadband division, they were basically, they were a cable provider. And they were the first people that were going to bring streaming movies to households, right? Because back then, the only way you could stream movies was in your hotel, right? And I'll talk to you off camera about some of the due diligence they did about what was shown at hotels and how long men watched and all that. That's another story. So they had an analyst conference when the Enron broadband division was announcing the set-top boxes and their ability to stream movies. And the catchphrase was Enron broadband ready, lit, and tested, okay? Or it might have been tested, ready, lit, tested. And the stock price of Enron stock went from like $38 to $71 that day, right? Wow. It doubled. It was a big jump. And Ken and others had options that they exercised, stock options they exercised after the analyst conference. And the evidence showed that I think Ken made $63 million that day. It was a good day, right? So we're doing focus groups and seeing how juries are going to react to a fella making $63 million in an afternoon. And unsurprisingly, the focus groups didn't think much of that. They thought anybody that made $63 million in one day is a crook. There's no way legally. And we were likening it to Michael Jordan or whomever, all these athletes, and it's not that unusual. And all the focus group mock jurors are just looking at us like, fuck you. $63 million, fuck you. So we're leaving the focus group, and we're kind of making the decision, are we going to try this case or are we going to plead it? And after that, we're probably going to plead it. But we're driving past a billboard on I-45 coming home, and the billboard said, Ford truck, best truck ever, right? So there's a thing called puffing and all that. And Ken goes, well, they can't prove that, what's the difference between us saying ready, lit, and tested and best truck ever? I mean, it's both just, what we say. Why am I going to have to go to prison basically for that and I said, the difference is you work at Enron and not at Ford, right? But it was one of those hard life lessons that no matter how much Ken believed that it was ready, lit, and tested, when you make $63 million in one day, it's just hard for a plumber or an electrician or a guy that works for the city of Houston that makes $50,000 in a year. How you're going to be found anything but guilty when you make that kind of money?
It's insane. I mean, looking back at the Enron experience, is there a lesson or insight from that trial that still shapes how you practice law today? That's a good question. It's just one more trial where I don't want to say right place, right time, but I had enough seat time to be able to deal with unpredictable things on the fly. And again, Aaron, it just wasn't the opening statement bit. It was transitioning into, oh crap, I'm going to be on my feet all day, every day for 6 weeks, as opposed to I'm going to have to talk every third or fourth day, right? So it's just experience and competence and focus. So does it shape the way I try cases? I don't know. I think it actually benefited me in my confidence, which obviously helps me to this day, because I didn't think our portion of that trial was going to be significant when it turned out it was the entire or the majority of the focus in that trial, and the right result happened. I mean, it's just like anything else. Confidence breeds success, 100%. And if I would have lost that trial, it would have probably had a devastating effect on me, because the only thing worse than losing a case is losing it on the front page of the lead story of every news outlet in the country. That sucks.
But when you win, the other side of that coin comes up. That you're confident enough and effective enough to where you can win a big boy case.
What is the post verdict cigar taste like? What's Dan's top cigar smoke after a case?
Well, back in those days, it wasn't cigar. It was Macallan 25. Those were some good victory parties. And we may get to this, but probably the best, most raw victory party I ever experienced was the Branch Davidian trial, because no one expected. Let me put it this way. By the time we got to final argument in Sheila's case, I believed we had won. I thought, okay, I got this one.
Yeah.
It's coming. I'm not sure anybody else thought that way, but even before I argued, I thought, I got this. After the argument, I felt even better. I literally had jurors nodding, and I thought the other side or some of the co-defendants, their arguments were so bad. Mine was brilliant by default, right? There's got to be at least one winner out of these six, and I'm it. So I felt very confident. And in Clive's case, in the Branch Davidian case, we didn't know. The jury was playing it very close to the vest. They weren't very visual at all. You kind of didn't know what they were thinking. You didn't get a bunch of head nodding. You didn't get a bunch of attaboy shit going on. You were just kind of like, oh, fuck, I don't know where this was going. So when Clive was acquitted, and he should have been acquitted, I consumed a lot of alcohol. And the story I always like to tell is Clive, who was unique. He was a true follower. He was a real Branch Davidian, and he truly believed that David Koresh was a prophet and all that. Clive just kept saying, I want to thank God and David Koresh for this verdict. I want to thank God and David Koresh for this verdict. Well, after about 6 or 8 Macallan 25s, which probably exhausted my credit card limit at the time, I grabbed the microphone and I said, well, I just called the State Bar of Texas, and neither God nor David Koresh is licensed. I'd like a little credit for this verdict. So that was...
I guess my last question for you, Dan, to wrap up. It's such high stress environments. You have so many different, clients or people that you're representing. Where do you find a sense of peace? Like when do you have time to just kind of breathe and let go, and kind of give us insight on what that looks like when you're closing your eyes before you sleep and the next day starts?
Well, first off, Aaron, you in my business, probably just like an oncologist or a pediatric surgeon or whatever, you have to compartmentalize, right? You have to think about what's in front of you and not what's coming or what's behind you. You just have to be focusing on that moment and that experience, because if you think about anything else, you're not going to be able to execute to your best ability. So being able to compartmentalize and leave there and not worry about the upset client over here or the angry wife or now ex-wife over there. So you have to just stay in the moment. In terms of what I do to relax, I quit drinking 3 years ago, and Tito still calls and wonders what happened. I mean, he misses me. I get that. I understand that. But I work out pretty hard for an old man, and going to the gym. I get up every day at 4:45 every single day. I have my first, double macchiato at about 5:30, and I'm under a set of weights by 5:45 not every single day, 5 days a week. So that's kind of that hour and a half is sort of my time. I turn off my phone. I don't check email. I go in there and I push through that. That's a lifesaver. And when I have time, and my family duties allow me, I ride off-road motorcycles, and that I've done that since before. That's how I met Mr. Haynes, was watching him. So that's sort of how I flush my commode is through off-road motorcycle riding.
Soon to come, some behind-the-scenes shots of Dan in IRL. Ripping with the bikes.
We'll have some behind the scenes right down on the trail. Those trail runs will be.
Yeah, I'm doing the Baja 1000 this fall. I'm doing it side by side this year. I did it previously in a motorcycle, but I'm a little long in the tooth to do the Baja 1000 on a
We'll,
dirt
you
bike.
know, if things work out, we'll get you, you know, maybe a GoPro or something.
Do you
And-
have you ever filmed yourself ever?
Yeah,
riding?
I have
I'm sure.
GoPros.
I'm sure.
Yeah, so that'd be good footage.
Have you seen those new Meta Ray-Bans? Those
I have.
glasses?
I
They
have.
got the camera on them.
Yeah.
Those are pretty sweet too.
How much shit would Racehorse Haynes give you seeing your posts on TikTok, your clips on TikTok?
You know, I think Haynes would get it.
Okay.
He'd get the clips too.
Haynes would be like, "Hey, I want some of that."
Yeah, Haynes would probably, if anything, he might edge me out and make me wait till he finished.
How do you think he would feel about you representing Tung 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 Sahur?
He might draw the line there, right? that might be just across.
Oh, just wait, Dan. That's the 0 to 18 demographic is gonna love the representation. Of
Yeah.
Well,
You know, Grand Theft Auto 6 is coming out, so you know we've got some you know
some
stuff.
content
Yeah,
ideas
well,
for
Are
you.
you
there.
familiar with this game?
I am.
Oh, okay.
Not 6. I remember when the first one came out.
Oh yeah,
What I mostly remember about that is my son, who was probably 4th grade or whatever at the time, and he was, you know, dragging hookers and putting them in the car. I'm like, no, we're not playing this game. And there's no hookers in the 4th grade.
That's hilarious.
Well, thank you, Dan, and thanks, guys. That wraps up the 3rd episode of Cogdell Law Uncensored.